My brother Todd held up his empty glass toward the waiter, like he was signaling a yacht. We were at Harborview, the kind of seafood restaurant where the tablecloths are thick linen, and the prices aren't printed next to the items because the assumption is that if you're asking, you can't afford it. It was my mother's 65th birthday. Todd had picked the restaurant. Todd had made the reservation. Todd had done absolutely nothing else in the preceding 40 years of our mother's life, but he had made this reservation, and the way the family was looking at him, you'd think he'd built the place with his bare hands. "Order whatever you want, Mom," Todd said, leaning back in his chair with the ease of a man who had never once worried about a bill arriving. "Tonight's on me." I looked at my water glass. Said nothing because I knew, with the specific, bone-deep certainty of someone who has seen this exact performance before, that tonight was not going to be on Todd. If you've ever been the invisible one in your family, the one who paid, sacrificed, and stayed quiet while someone else took the bow, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what happens when that bill arrives will stay with you. My name is Claire Whitfield. I'm 38 years old. I'm a dental hygienist. I drive a 6-year-old Civic with a cracked dashboard, and for the last 11 years, I've been quietly, methodically, and almost entirely secretly keeping my family financially alive. Not because they asked. They never asked. They just needed, and I paid. And somewhere along the way, that became the invisible architecture of everything they called their normal life. My mother's house, the 3-bedroom colonial in Dayton, where she'd lived since 1994, had been 2 months from foreclosure in 2013, when my father's medical debt finally overwhelmed everything else. I found out on a Tuesday afternoon when she called me crying, not to ask for help exactly, but in that particular way she cried, when she wanted you to understand the depth of a problem without having to directly request a solution. I transferred $4,000 that evening. I set up an automatic payment the following week. I never told anyone. That's where it started. It didn't stop for 11 years. The crab arrived at the table on a silver platter the size of a small coffee table. Dungeness, Alaskan king, snow crab legs, stacked in a crown formation that the waiter described with genuine enthusiasm. My sister-in-law Renee photographed it from 3 angles before anyone touched it. My nephew Tyler immediately reached for the largest leg with both hands. My mother pressed her palm to her chest like she might cry from happiness. Todd ordered a second bottle of wine without looking at the price. I did the math quietly in my head. I'd been doing quiet math my whole adult life. It's a reflex now, involuntary as breathing. We were going to hit $5,000 before dessert. My brother didn't have $5,000. I knew this with precision, the way you know things about people when you've been quietly funding their life from a distance. Todd worked in sales for a flooring company and spent his commission checks within 10 days of receiving them. His credit cards were rotated and partially maxed. He had a good laugh and a great handshake, and the specific confidence of someone who has always believed, without evidence, that things would work out. They worked out for him because of me. He just didn't know that part. Midway through dinner, my mother turned to Todd and said the thing that cracked something open inside me. She said, "I don't know what I would do without you. You're the one who always shows up." Todd squeezed her hand, nodded like a man accepting an honor. I was sitting 3 feet away. I had paid her property tax in March, $1,800, because she'd mentioned offhandedly that the notice looked confusing. I had paid her heating bill every December for 7 straight years. I had paid the plumber who fixed her basement pipe last October, the electrician who rewired her garage in 2021, the tree service that removed the oak that split during an ice storm and nearly took out her back fence. I had shown up every single time, in the only way that actually kept the lights on. I picked up my water glass, put it down, breathed. When the truth in your bank account doesn't match the story your family tells about you, that's not just painful. That's the kind of thing that quietly rewrites who you're willing to be going forward. If you know what I mean. Stay right here. When the bill arrived, Todd held it with both hands and looked at it long enough that I could see, from across the table, the number registering in his face. The easy posture shifted. He set the bill down, picked up his wine, set that down too. "So," he said, and his voice had a new texture, careful and searching. "Maybe we split this." My mother looked confused. Renee examined her napkin. Tyler was still eating. Todd looked at me, and I understood, in that perfectly clear moment, exactly what was happening. I was the solution he hadn't announced yet. I was the quieter sibling who always handled things. He had made the reservation knowing, somewhere beneath the performance, that I would be there when the number was too large to absorb alone. I opened my purse, took out my phone, not to pay, to pull up my banking app, and then, methodically, to open the folder I had created 8 months earlier when I first started suspecting that this day was coming. Transaction records, organized by date, going back to 2013. Mortgage assistance payments, tax payments, utility bills, medical copays for my mother's knee surgery in 2019 that she'd always believed insurance covered. Repair invoices paid in full. A personal loan I'd quietly retired for Todd in 2018 when a bad month turned into a worse quarter. 61 pages of documentation that told the story of an invisible decade. I turned the phone screen toward Todd first. Just Todd. I watched him read. I didn't make a speech. I didn't cry, though I had cried about this many times in private, in my car, in the shower, on the phone with exactly one friend who had listened without flinching every single time. I didn't slam anything on the table or raise my voice in a restaurant where the tablecloths were thick linen. I said simply and without performance, "I've been covering the house since 2013. Every major bill, every emergency. The records are here if anyone wants to look." The table went very quiet. My mother looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from her before. Not guilt exactly. Something more disorienting than guilt. The look of someone whose map of a place has just been revealed as completely wrong. "Claire," she started. "You don't have to say anything right now," I said. "I just needed you to know." I paid my portion of the bill, my exact portion, calculated cleanly, and I left enough on the table for a generous tip because the waiter had been excellent, and none of this was his problem. Then I drove home in my 6-year-old Civic with the cracked dashboard, and I sat in my driveway for a long time. Not sad exactly, just finished. Finished with smallness. Finished with invisibility. Finished with being the foundation of a house that never once asked what I needed. The following week, I stopped the automatic mortgage payment. Not out of cruelty, out of the simple, overdue recognition that I had spent 11 years choosing everyone else and not once chosen myself. It was, quietly, the most powerful thing I'd ever done. If you've been the invisible one, the one who paid and stayed quiet and waited for someone to notice, I hope this story reminded you that the truth always has a record. And the moment you stop shrinking is the moment everything changes. Share this if you know someone who needs to hear it.